Richard, a backpacker, goes to Bangkok, Thailand, with the purpose of experiencing something completely different from his familiar life. He encounters Françoise and her boyfriend, Etienne, at his hotel. He also meets a strange and crazed man, Daffy, who outbursts on about a beach paradise on a secret island and the parasites of civilization. Daffy later commits suicide but leaves Richard a map to the island, convincing him that it exists. Later, local police investigates him and let him go. Richard persuades Françoise and Etienne to accompany him to the island, partly out of an infatuation for Françoise and the promise that it's something different from the typical tourist experience. They travel from Bangkok to the shoreline of Koh Samui in the Gulf of Thailand, where Richard befriends a pair of American surfers. They talk eagerly about the myth of the beach and how it has an almost unlimited supply of marijuana. Richard does not come clean his knowledge, but later copies his map and slides it under their door the next morning, struggling with his decision to inform them but deciding that world travelers aren't supposed to keep information from each other. To finally touch the island, Richard, Françoise, and Etienne must swim across to it. When they first arrive on the island, they come across an enormous marijuana plantation guarded by local farmers armed with AK-47 assault rifles, where they hardly manage to avoid finding. After jumping off cliff, Françoise is the first to take the leap ahead of her unwilling male compatriots, and landing in a lake below, they are seen by Kitty, who takes them to the beach community. They are carefully interrogated by the island's leader Sal regarding their knowledge of the island, but are accepted. The trio are introduced to everybody and over the next few days become joined into the community. One night while Richard and Françoise are walking down the beach, she tells him that she is falling in love with him. They swim out into the ocean to look at a swarm of bioluminescent plankton, where Françoise kisses Richard and has physical relationship with him on the beach. In spite of their tries to keep the romance a secret, the whole island finds out about it, including Etienne. Although distressed, Etienne says he will not stand in their way if Françoise is happier with Richard. At first, the island and its community seem to live up to their reputation. Richard swims out into the ocean to catch fish with a harpoon and is attacked by a young shark, but he stabs it to death, which gains him much respect, even though Sal's boyfriend, Bugs, opposing to the fact that it was a young shark with no hunting experience. Days later, Richard is chosen to accompany Sal to the mainland to acquire supplies. People from the community line up to give Richard needed items to purchase. When Bugs talks to Richard, he brutally squeezes Richard's balls, slyly warning him to have distance with Sal. In Koh Phangan, Richard accidentally meets the American surfers who are preparing to go to the beach with two girls. Richard efforts to convince them that the beach turned out to be a myth after all, but the surfers aren't so easily put off and storm off when Richard becomes intensely belligerent with them. Sal overhears their talk about the copy of the map and confronts Richard, who confesses his guilt, but does not disclose he made a copy of the map. In exchange for Sal's silence and Richard's return to the island, Sal uses Richard into having physical intercourse with her that night. When they return to the island, everything returns to normal until the Swedes are attacked by a shark while fishing. Sten passes away almost suddenly and Christo is brutally injured. The only options for Christo are to go to the mainland to get medical help or stay on the island and take his chances, as Sal refuses to allow a doctor to come to the island. Christo chooses to stay, not wanting to go near the water after his encounter with the shark. Christo's condition worsens, consistently lowering the morale of the whole community, so they take him out into the middle of the jungle and leave him to die. However, Etienne, disgusted by the group's decision, promises to stay with Christo. Later, Sal sees the American surfers on the neighboring island and furiously charges Richard with the task of watching them so he can obtain the map and destroy it. While he is waiting for the surfers to arrive, they stay on the other island for days, much to Richard's frustration. Françoise shows up, furious and heartbroken, saying that Sal has told everybody about her date with Richard. Richard cannot cope with his task and retreats into the forest, where he becomes temporarily insane, believing that he is communing with the long-dead Daffy. He evades the other islanders and sets lethal traps in an attempt to keep them at bay, at times rambling that he is a character in a video game. Meanwhile, the surfers reach the island but are discovered and killed by the marijuana farmers before they can get to the beach. Richard witnesses their executions and retreats to the community to convince Etienne and Françoise to leave the island, believing that all their lives are now in danger. Etienne refuses, not good enough to leave the emaciated Christo, whose leg has become infected. When the other two briefly leave the tent, Richard tearfully smothers Christo to death in a mercy killing. When he leaves the tent, though, he is struck across the face by a farmer and knocked unconscious. He wakes up in a tent in pain, surrounded by the community and the farmers. The farmers approach Sal, with whom they had an agreement, and give her a gun loaded with a single bullet and a challenge. Shoot Richard dead and be allowed to stay, or leave the island forever. Sal lines Richard and fires an empty chamber, throwing the crowd into chaos. The lead farmer smiles as the community instantly collapses. Sal falls in a flood of tears, as the crowd, now in panics, flees in droves to get away from the island. Together, they swim back to the mainland and go their separate ways. Lastly, Richard in an internet cafe to check his mail. He gets a letter from Francoise titled, Beach Life, covering a photograph of the whole beach community and an animated handwritten inscription over the image, Parallel Universe. Love, Francoise X. Thank you for watching this video. Please subscribe our channel for more movie reviews. Like, share and hit your comments.